Hey folks, welcome to the Counter Clipping Show. We are live tonight from StreamYard. So we'll be back to OBS next week. So I'd like to welcome everybody, first of all, to Counter Clipping Show number 72. I think we're 72. 72 for May 2nd, 2022. We are drinking, or rather finishing, the Tem Navulin double cast. This is actually just emptied it, and the remains are now in here. We are clipping. I'll have my regular cards and stuff back next week. Barbarossa Army Group Center 2nd edition. We are starting in on the Soviets. There's a lot of Soviets, strangely enough. So we're going to probably be doing this next week, too, is my guess, unless I manage to get clipping done in the off, during the week, which does sometimes happen, but, maybe not tonight. Tonight's topic is World War II in the Pacific Theater. It's a big topic, and I don't know if we're going to be able to cover like all of it in the content that it necessarily deserves, but we're going to at least cover the highlights. And of course, it's super relevant right now because we have the red hot new Pacific War out from GMT and designer Mark Herman, which we started to play last week. We only got the Pearl Harbor scenario done, but there were, weird logistical challenges that occurred as well. So we will be resuming this week with the Savo Island scenario, and I'm hoping that we can get a second scenario done as well. Because if it's one scenario a week, then I'm not sure it's going to move very fast, but it'll move faster as we go, right? We spent a lot of time looking rules up, right? We're still figuring it out. The stuff behind me is the latest, mostly the latest edition of Call of Cthulhu. The Horror on the Orient Express is the boxed version that they did a few years ago with a ton of props and stuff in the box. And there is a new hardcover version of it out now that you can get from, which may or may not be print on demand. I don't know, from Chaosium, and it's nice, but it doesn't have the props. I actually got this. I want to say from Cool Stuff. Actually, back when Cool Stuff was selling games, at Origins for something like $25 or $30. It was whatever I paid for it. It was a very good price. So one irritating thing here is that the Soviet rifle regiments are mixed in with the Soviet rifle divisions, which is going to make, sorting more of a headache than it should be. We are using the new Aegis trays for this, which should work out pretty well, especially for the Soviets, where there's like a legitimate ton of rifle divisions. So before we get any farther, I would like to say hello to Strelnikov, John C. from the hot and sunny Philippines, who is playing Dien Ben Phu, the Kim Kanger thing from Legion Wargames, which has a pretty good reputation, actually. Rob Johnson from Florida, Christopher Prest, Dave 1013, Tim Zales, Carl from the Wargame Bootcamp is enjoying the miserable weather in Southern California. Dale Brady from dreadful Michigan, E4 Airman, one of several of us here from Central Ohio, Bill Simone, Mike Anthony, Corey Hanlon, also from Central Ohio, David Imperato, Palelu 99, Lind Pratt, also from Central Ohio, Marty Sample from wherever Marty's from in New England, Ray Musselman, Jeff Anderson, if we didn't get you already, Joe Faust from Akron, Mo Romaniuk, Todd Walser from Central Ohio, Vince Reeve, Fred Daniel, John Clark. There's a lot of people here so far. Holy cow. Try not to miss anybody here. Jack P., welcome to the stream. Daniel Silverthorne has returned. Fast Hines, Peter Rushton, Daniel Barney. Daniel, haven't seen you here in a while. Welcome back. Achilles, Kilroy, if Kilroy was here. William Bird, Scott Kaufhold, Abraxas MF. Fucko is in the house. Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials. I got news for you. Chad Kennedy, Dicey Odds, Fast Hines. I think I got you already. Jeff Beeler, Findle 70. Cataclysm Now. Wade Moore, Michael Kirk, Charles Latorre, Thomas Bandy, Drew Detterer, Keith Powell. I think we got everybody. I apologize. John Keyports. I didn't get you. Joe Perez, welcome back. Apologize if I missed anybody. I want to say the first Pacific War game that I played was probably Victory in the Pacific. And I'm imagining that I am not alone in having had that experience. So pipe up in the chat what your first Pacific War game was. Now, of course, we have, Pacific War was there was a lot of war in the Pacific War, right? So you've got land games, that date all the way back to, say, Avalon Hill's Guadalcanal off the top of my head. You know, right down to today when we're seeing, games about, island battles and stuff like that, including some of the CSS games from Compass. So, and then of course we have a lot of naval and or air games in the Pacific. I've been clearing my throat for like the last hour. Joe Perez, first Pacific game, USN from S&T 29. That is a very early one. Midway, Avalon Hills Midway, obviously, is another seminal. I haven't played it. I have a hunch that it's one of the ones that actually holds up fairly well. The Avalon Hills Midway, but I haven't played it. So it is a seminal game one way or the other. A lot of folks cut their teeth on that. Flat Top, of course, is something that we were bound to mention at some point. Now, Flat Top is a straight air naval simulation, right? As opposed to something like, say, Guadalcanal, which is a straight land. Not sure what role air plays. I've never played Avalon Hills Guadalcanal, so I'm not sure what, if any, role air plays in that game. I'm going to guess and say, based on its antiquity, that probably that role is minimal. Or obviously, the air war was a critical part of the Pacific campaign. I mean, it was a critical part of the European war too, but the dynamic is different because it's, the air is so often acting in concert with or opposing naval forces, which was, less often true in Europe. So we also have, naturally, I have played the Hunters, which is, U-boats in the Atlantic. There is Silent Victory, which is American subs in the Pacific, which I have, but haven't, and I think I've done an unboxing of, but I haven't actually played that. I want to. It's on the to-do list. The very, very, we're out of focus, damn it. The very congested to-do list. So, the command tent mentions, first of all, welcome back. I just found this out literally, just before the stream. Matt Colville's D&D Monster Book Kickstarter hit its $2 million stretch goals, which means we will be supposedly seeing an entire turn of campaign for North Africa from those folks. I am very much looking forward to seeing that experience and seeing how much hair loss there is over the course of that experience. So, all right, trying to keep these straight here, and I just knocked the sack over. Oh well. Compass Games Silent War with the IJN expansion. That's a good call too. I'm not sure what exactly Silent War covers though. Is that just the Pacific? The one I have is I think this is true. Actually, I've got all the GMT Constant Press games, the Hunters, the Hunted, and Silent Victory, and but I don't have the ones that Compass has done, which is the World War I one. Trying to remember what that's called. That actually looks quite neat. And then there's and Beneath the Med too is another one, but that these are not Pacific, so I don't have any of the Pacific Solitaire stuff. Let me put it that way. Well, not the Gregory M. Smith Solitaire stuff. I do have a copy of Tokyo Express, which I acquired a couple of years ago. It's unpunched. I haven't played it. Haven't really tried to play it. I've glanced through it and it looks neat. It is on my to-do list. So let's get to, I tend not to count these, right? I should, right? They're the legitimate, small scale squad level Pacific land actions. But I'm not sure. I think this is something that people aren't trying to exclude, but I think it's going to get forgotten when the time comes to actually talk about Pacific war games. Because it's part of ASL, so it is part of its kind of its own universe. John C. mentions MMP's Fire in the Sky, which we absolutely I haven't played that, but it's got a very good reputation and has, I think, probably one of the strongest box covers of any Pacific War game. But I haven't played it, and there's a new version from, I believe, Phalanx out that just came out in the last, say, 6 months or so, and it's got a good reputation. There's a couple other things from Multiman that came out. Avenge Pearl Harbor, which is another game on a similar looking scale. From Compass, there is Pacific Tide. That's a Gregory M. Smith game, and that actually passed through my hands at one point before I just decided that I was not going to get time. I was not going to have time to deal with it. So let me, since I see Kyle Reese in the chat here, so let me talk about the giveaways. This was, I've really, I've been doing giveaways here and there for a while, and I really have not had very many problems until this time. We had some issues. We had something that got returned for an undeliverable address that was, sent back to me. And then there was a delay due to, I just couldn't get to the post office at the time and get it taken care of. So all of the existing giveaways are out the door, except Viteus. If Viteus is watching, you got dibs on level 7 invasion. I gave you specific instructions to email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. You did not. So you have until next week's show to contact me, and I will get that shipped out to you. And if you don't, we will redraw for it. So I'm giving you a fair shot. You gotta contact me via the approved channel. You can't just reach out to me on whatever ancient ass email address you found on the blog, which I think sounds like that's what happened, but that email address hasn't been valid for a long time. So sorry about that. So good call. C3I. Now, of course, we're going to get to Empire of the Sun here, right? Picket Duty from Legion Wargames is Destroyers versus Kamikazes. That looks neat. I have not actually had that. Kyle Reese mentioned, this is part of the Pacific War, right? Battle of Singapore. As far as like the land battle goes, it wasn't really that well contested. So I don't know of any games focusing on the Battle of Singapore itself. But there is the giant Second World War Singapore from Diffraction Entertainment that covers not only that Singapore camp of the Japanese take Singapore, but a lot of action in the Dutch East Indies at the beginning of the war as well. It is a huge game with if you play the whole thing, with an enormous footprint. But there's also a decent scenario selection too, so you're not necessarily tied to, and it's got a pretty good Vassal modules too, by the way. So I will mention that. Yeah, let me mention that John Longshore does the work of reminding me. Please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. We'll have the subscriber alerts back next week too. That's why I'm hoping Viteus contacts me so I can get this out the door to him and I don't have to go back to StreamYard for next week. If you want to help support the channel, please do check out the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi, all of which are linked in the video description. Thank you, patrons, for helping to support the channel and help make this happen every single week. Super chats are on, so you can throw me a couple bucks in as a super chat, which will ensure that I'm totally not. I do not have the focus while clipping and doing this to filter on this on purpose. But if you throw in a comment in super chat, I'm guaranteed to see it because you can't really miss it. Otherwise, we tend to have so much comment volume that I will end up missing stuff. Sometimes a lot of stuff. There was Battle Hymn. Dave 1013 mentions that is the Pacific version of Ambush. He also says there's a ST game on Singapore. Jeff Beeler says he's seen about 3 games on the Malaya campaign, which at least one of those was in either S&T or a World at War, or World at War magazine, I should say. John C. says, are we counting quasi-theoretical games like Plan, Origin, Conquest, and Consequences? That's a good question, and it's probably beyond the scope of what we're going to get talked about here tonight. To talk about exactly where hypothetical and quasi-hypothetical games fit and how best to categorize them. this is a thing that I personally have gone back and forth on with a number of people. I would be inclined. I mean, those hypothetical situations take place in the Pacific, so I would put them in this category. But that is a topical category and not a thematic category. Charles Latour says CSL says they're back in business. I haven't seen that. I hope CSL stays around. Right? They were producing some fairly decent stuff, and I would just as soon see them overcome their current challenges and remain operational. So, so I think that's good. John C says he found counter clippers being sold. Interesting. So these things, John, the regular ones, that's fantastic. I mean, so there's a big difference. I think there's a difference between a not rigidly historical sandbox like Conquest of Consequences or Triumph and Tragedy, and something like Plan Orange, which posits a specific scenario, contrafactual scenario that did not happen historically. You could theoretically have a Conquest of Consequences or Triumph and Tragedy game that plays out very historically. I just don't think that's going to happen very often in either game. Now, another thing, Tiger of Malaya from Avalanche, mentioned by Mike Anthony. That's another good call. And perhaps unfairly, I think we a lot of us, I'm speaking only for myself here, can tend to accidentally forget to mention Avalanche Press. Fast Hines says, what would we recommend? VG's Ambush or Compass's Combat? So I have since learned that despite the fact that a lot of people have flippantly compared them, they are very dissimilar games. And I don't think that it's an apples to apples comparison. And neither game is very much like apples to apples anyway. Orient Express on the shelf. I've actually already said this. I'm getting a lot of traffic. I just put the Call of Cthulhu stuff on the shelf. This is, again, not all the Call of Cthulhu stuff, but it's the stuff that's worth showing off. That is a Call of Cthulhu tabletop RPG campaign, horror on the Orient Express, in something like 5 books and in the box, and then there's a huge quantity of props in the box as well. I ordered the 2 prop sets from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, and they have not yet been arrived or have shipped, as far as I can tell. So that's a thing. There'll be unboxings when they show up. Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp says he got Advanced Pacific Theater of Operations. Holy God! All right, so part of the dialogue here is probably going to touch on strategic level World War II games that also cover the Pacific and not just Europe, like the original World War II Pacific Theater of Operations, before Decision got their hands on it and decisioned it. So I have glanced at the massive amount of rules in that game and was instantly turned off. And that's not something I normally say, because it's like complexity. Yeah, okay, it can be a pain, but I'm generally willing to deal with it. It was a turn off in that case because I'd seen the older game, and it's like these aren't that complicated. Then you've got, Advanced Third Reich was, okay, so we had the original Third Reich, which was just the war in Europe. Then there was Advanced Third Reich, and then alongside Advanced Third Reich was Empire of the Rising Sun, which was the Pacific War. Pretty unsatisfying naval model in that game, I think. Now we have a World at War, which combines the global war, which adds some meat to the Pacific, to the naval model. But I think it's still probably some folks are going to still find it unsatisfying. And that's the challenge of trying to design a game that meets your needs of a naval air model in the war in Europe and also in the war in the Pacific. This is why, for example, Axis Empire's Total Krieg, I think, is a fantastic game. And Axis Empire's Daisenso, played by itself as opposed to being played alongside Axis Empire's Total Krieg, is kind of a dud because the naval and air systems in that game system are really abstract, and it feels incredibly shallow and unsatisfying in the Pacific, where that is a lot of what you are dealing with. Bleak Outlook 08. Thank you for stopping by. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. Holden Messerschmitt says every tactical Pacific needs a bonsai mechanic for Japanese units. I agree, and I reject Marty's correction. I think it was supposed to be bonsai, not bonsai. If you know what I'm saying. Global War. Jug Senseth mentions Global War. Was that the SPI Global War? Is that the game we're talking about? Old Lady Plays, welcome back to the stream. Kenneth T, welcome back. He owns 2 war games on the Battle of Hong Kong, Honor Alone and the Siege of Hong Kong. There is what appears to me from my not necessarily well-informed share, there appears to be a lot of very interesting war game design work being done in China. And I'm when I say that, I mean Great China, which includes Taiwan and that type, that and Hong Kong and that type of thing. There's a lot of interesting war game stuff happening there. I also do have the Pacific. Now that is another variant of the. It's overly reductive, and I don't favor describing it this way, but I'm going to anyway because I'm lazy. It's another answer to Third Reich, and the War Europe is another answer to Third Reich, and the Pacific is the Pacific version of that. East Wind Rain is an interesting looking one. Old Task Force Games title. There was also Carrier War from, I think, Omega Games. The War of the Suns from MMP was a Leonard Toe design. He's I want to say out of Hong Kong. So that's another example. A couple of those things have, I think, come into via MMP in the international series. Half-Ass Gaming sounds like he's got COVID. That's no good. No good at all. Avalanche also has the Great Pacific War. So Avalanche did the game called John Prados' Third Reich, which was basically Third Reich changed to a fistful of dice system. And then they did the Great Pacific War as the Pacific companion to that. I did not like John Prados' Third Reich. So the Avalanche pressed John Prados' Third Reich. So that GDW's Pearl Harbor actually looks fairly interesting. Vince Ree mentions Absolute Victory. That's another quite sandboxy looking game. It looks fairly interesting from Compass. Strelnikov mentions the upcoming China's War. That's a coin game from GMT. And I had that on pre-order and I backed off, and I might pre-order it again. We'll see once it nears completion and I know a little bit more about it. I think the only things coming through at the moment pre-order wise are Almoravid from GMT and Race for Bastogne from MMP, which should be here soonish. I think we're still on target for this week. Magazine games on the PTO. I think the answer is going to be yes. I just can't name any that I've specifically recommended. Jeff Beeler mentions GRD's War of Resistance. It's actually not the Second Sino-Japanese War. It's part of the Second Sino-Japanese War. It doesn't cover the whole thing. And it's also burdened with Europa mechanics that I think are going to result in a very unfun play experience. This is GRD's War of Resistance, which is an interesting game from the standpoint of there's really not a lot of like big detailed games on that part of World War II, right? I went with War of the Suns as my, and I consciously made the decision to go with War of the Suns as my solution for that topic, and not War of Resistance. So do we count South Pacific? I mean, I think we have to, but both South Pacific and the upcoming Burma are sort of extract mini games out of Empire of the Sun. Just to get this out of the way, Conquest of Paradise is not a Pacific War, but it's a Pacific 4X game set in the like prehistorical Pacific. Daniel Barney mentions Zero Leader from DVG. That actually does look neat. I have to admit, it's the only one of those games that tempted me. Let me put it that way. Todd also mentions Operation Olympic. The old, I assume we're talking about the old SPI Operation Olympic. Nordic Maelstrom, is there a solitaire game for flying planes in the Pacific during World War II? If there isn't, then I'm sure Gregory M. Smith is working on it. Drew Detterer mentions GDW's 1942. That's true too. In addition to the Pearl Harbor game, which is not just Pearl Harbor, it's the whole Pacific War. So Zero Leader, Corsair Leader. When Tigers Fight, China-Burma 1944, that's true because it's an old Command Magazine game. War of Resistance, it has the most maps, but they're 11 by 17, or they're like Europa box size maps. They're a goofy map size. They're not like full-size maps. Back to the table. Welcome to the stream. Looking forward to a Most Fearful Sacrifice. Sure, I think a lot of people are. Looks very promising, and I don't have any updates on when it's shipping, though. Bataan, good catch on that. David Imperato mentions Bataan, the Vance von Voorhees design from Compass. That's I haven't played that, so that's one that I was probably going to forget about. Kevin Roach mentions USN Deluxe from Decision, but that's from Decision. S&T Iwo Jima, which was in the Spitzer era, that actually looks interesting. The Pearl Harbor game from Legion does look interesting, actually. I was looking at that, and apparently that's been on pre-order for eons. I kept putting this in the chat, or in the video description, and I not once did I actually mention the May Day Traveler Celebration, which occurred over this past weekend. So I didn't play in any of the games, but I did sit through a lot of the seminars. Air Force and Dauntless, Avalanche Press, the Leyte game. I actually have an unboxing of that massive Leyte game in the can. At some point, you will see that unboxing video whenever there's a slot. So we're back on schedule this week. We not only do we have an unboxing video scheduled for this week, which is the Admiral's War expansion. Thank you, fucko. And then we have Traveler Tuesday tomorrow. So there's more videos coming. And of course, there'll be the show with Dan tomorrow, which is on Dan's channel. So stay tuned for that. Polelu 99. So, okay. So I believe this to be correct. Somebody could correct me if this is wrong. I believe that the Battle Line version of Dauntless is standalone, but the Avalon Hill version of Dauntless is an expansion for Air Force. So if you have the Avalon Hill Dauntless, you need Air Force. Divine Wind from Sim Canada. Yeah, that's an interesting one too. I actually had Carrier War pass through my hands at one point, and I got rid of it, and I probably shouldn't have. Alberto Martin Bartolome, welcome to the stream, but probably no habla español, at least from here. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Kim Kanger's Nemesis is about the Japanese offensive in Burma. Yep, good catch on that. Joe Okabayashi, the Pacific titles in the... I'm going to continue to call them Diffraction Entertainment, I'm sure, but they are now formerly the Knowledge Company. But they are very expensive. I think it's a little unfair to call them modifications of the Europa system, I think that makes them sound more mechanically similar to Europa than they actually are. However, and this is is where my problem with that idea boils out, is that even if the mechanics are different, it is still going to inherit all of the scale problems that Europa has and continues to have, and only are mitigated in the very smallest Europa games. Last 100 Yards, Solomon's just came out. VG's Carrier. Yep, that's so there will be Carrier Battles Philippine Sea coming from Compass at some point soon. I'm looking forward to that. Ronald Nicholson from Newark, Ohio. Welcome back. Interceptor and Knife Fighter Ace, I'm reasonably sure take place in Europe. So we're clear, and I'm not sure. I know it's come up already, but just so we're clear, I think that there's a very good chance that Empire of the Sun may be the best war game of any kind at any complexity level of its decade. So it and any of the variants thereof, including Plan Orange and South Pacific and probably Burma 2, even though it's not out and I haven't seen it yet, are probably going to all end with, my very highest recommendations. It is a challenging game to learn, to make it work, but it is worth your time. And it tells you something, that there are people who will say that it is too small and too fast and too high scale and too abstract to be a satisfying Pacific game. And there are other people that will describe it as a monster game. I can't guarantee that you will like it. It is a complete masterpiece of game design, and it gets my very highest recommendation. Carrier Battles, no, I don't think we did, but we talked about, there's Carrier Battles Philippine Sea that's coming out from Compass. But I don't think that's what you're talking about. Furiant Midway, we did mention already. Yeah, we got a couple of these already, and I dropped them. Hello from Spain. So it is 8:32 p.m. here in Eastern Time in the U.S. There's a crap ton of Panzer Grenadier Pacific material, but I've never played any of it. I never had any of the Pacific stuff for Panzer Grenadier. And, I didn't like the Europe stuff particularly that I had. Carrier. Okay, so we're going to get to Pacific War. So actually, we might as well do that now. So the new and very shiny and very, very hot Pacific War is, a light revision of the classic Victory Games Pacific War from 1986 or whatever it was. Iron Bottom Sound 3, I don't know anything about the game, but man, it's got a great cover. And obviously we'll talk about Flat Top. So if, you go check the playthrough, the after action report from Flat Top out from Winterfest that I put up. That was doing fairly well. John C. will be actually unboxing Canvas Temple's new Admiral's War expansion on Thursday. Mike Anthony mentions Return to the Rock Corregidor, which is an ASL third-party historical module from Revolution Games. That doesn't sound right. There is also a game called Scratch One Flat Top, which I think is a double blind game system, as I recall. So there's a lot of the same. The two games, Empire of the Sun and Pacific War, have a certain amount of the same underlying logic to them, where they're kind of designed around the operation. And the scale is very different, obviously, but they're, you're going to get a lot more detail in Pacific War than you are in Empire of the Sun, because you have, a counter for every single capital ship, for example. So, and you have 100-mile hexes as opposed to whatever size the hexes are in Empire of the Sun. Although the map scale is not as different as you might think. I mean, Empire of the Sun is a 1-map game, and Pacific War is a 2-map game. I mean, it's only 1 map different, right? My favorite Pacific War movie is probably Tora Tora Tora. I haven't seen Letters from Iwo Jima. I need to rectify that. You could totally do stuff with Monkey with Australia in Pacific War. I mean, I know it's possible. I don't know if it's a good idea, but Vince Ree, you're going to look like Popeye, just like me, right? So Fire in the Sky is definitely different. It is a much higher level and much more abstract. If Australia is a zombies game, that is definitely not something I am into. I find that the entire zombies thing is an absolutely tired and irrelevant genre. Land battle war game set in the World War II Pacific War. I'm a fan of the Adam Starkweather CSS company scale games, the Solomon's Campaign games, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. Now, you got to either have a certain type of player to play that Japanese side, or you got to play it solitaire because, it is a bit thankless to play the Japanese in those things. So I've kind of decided we'll talk about the RPG stuff maybe even later today, but not right now. I want to actually circle back to Pacific War, which we got to fool with. So we spent a certain amount of time, rather a lot of time, more time than actually rolling dice. Just kind of trying to figure out the sequencing and stuff like that. I think we need to pay closer attention this coming week to the flow charts. So we'll be doing that. What you see in the Pearl Harbor scenario is basically the airstrike mechanics. And it teaches you certain things about air missions in general, but it's an airstrike mission specifically. I'm not 100% convinced we did everything right, but I am reasonably sure that anything we screwed up will be, we're trying to learn it, right? We're not looking for a competitive experience right off the top. So I did get the chance to play Conquest of Consequences, and I did like it. It's substantially more interesting than I was afraid it might be. I was afraid it would be a rather dry, and it didn't play like that at all. Carl from the Wargame Bootcamp says Australia is a Martin Wallace game. Oh, well, I guess we don't need to look at it then, do we? CA, good call, good catch. Old SPI title there, very good. I do not have an answer, Ken, to you on Iwo Jima Rage Against the Marines, other than that, what a fabulous title that is. So just not interested in zombies. I'm just not. John, I think the calculus there was that they were going to get declared war on by the U.S. anyway if they just did that. So, and they might if they were going to do that, they might as well make it happen on their terms. So the engagement scenarios for Pacific War are all essentially Dave 1013. The changes are really small. I suppose the biggest mechanical change is there's supposedly a change to the submarine rules, which I haven't studied in detail yet because we haven't gotten that far. There's also a nomenclature change where instead of single engine, twin engine, and 4-engine planes, there are fighters, tactical planes, and bombers. That is pretty much strictly a nomenclature change. There are a couple of very minor other differences that I am aware of. Otherwise, the amount of revision between the Victory Games Classic and the current GMT version is really small, except for the fact that, man, it's a lot better looking. Nordic Maelstrom will be here when you get back. It's all good. Guess we'll keep that out for now. Ronald Nicholson asks if there will be a Pacific version of Atlantic Chase. That is supposed to be first in a series, so I don't know what the specific plans are for it, but I strongly suspect that we will see, in the long run, assuming, we follow through on the promise of making it a series. I do think we will see Pacific stuff using that system. And I haven't had a chance to play it yet. It's supposed to be really good. Bisnunya is worried about the FOMO. That's the FOMO is for fear of missing out, right? I understand that, and there are at least one game in my library that I can think of that I did buy absolutely for that reason. But it's not Pacific War. We're getting to Pacific War right now, and the small unmounted map in Pacific War really magnifies the playability of the whole thing a lot, right? In the Victory Games, and this is strictly a physical component thing, but this is a significant upgrade from the Victory Games thing. There were a lot of scenarios in the Victory Games version of Pacific War that you needed both maps to play. Now they have given you sort of this 1/4 sized map that cuts out that, Dutch East Indies / Solomons area. So you could just have that and play out like 80% of the campaigns can be played on that map. So, and that, that saves you a huge amount of table footprint. So, that change by itself adds tremendously to the playability. I would encourage you to try to bust out some of those engagement scenarios. They're pretty small. They'll have play times on them like 15 minutes and stuff like that. And it's probably theoretically true, but it took us like 3 hours to do Pearl Harbor with, but that's like set up and, and making the die rolls and looking rules up and all that other stuff. Fastines mentions Operation Shoestring. That's an interesting suggestion. That is a pretty early GMT game, and it's probably not. I think you're right about that. It's probably not. It's not an exceptionally well regarded game. Let me put it that way. Carol from the Wargame Bootcamp says that Jerry White had a demo map of the Atlantic Chase system in the Pacific. So that's cool. And Mark, who did Bayonets and Tomahawks, is doing a Solomon's game of the same series. Great. I'll be happy to pick those up. The other thing with Pacific War, and we've said this before, and Mark has said this, and I'll say it again just for the sake of, having a complete discussion. Lee was only there for 2 hours. We were there for 3 hours. Is don't necessarily assume that you're buying Pacific War for the strategic scenario, which is like all of World War II in the Pacific. Nobody, including Mark Herman, has said that that's the point of that game. The emphasis in that game is toward the campaign scenarios, the battle and campaign scenarios, all of which are far, 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 far more playable than the strategic scenario. Strelnikov games on the Aleutian campaigns. There's what's it called? War on the Wind, which is Atu and Kiska from Compass. I could think of that off the top of my head. I think there was an S&T and or a magazine game. Might not have been S&T. It might have been World at War magazine. Somebody else mentioned the Island War Quad up thread, and I didn't get the chance to respond to that at the time, so sorry about that. John Stanley, we have mentioned South Pacific as well as Plan Orange and the upcoming Burma as extracts from Empire of the Sun. Jeff Beeler mentions Avalanche Press's Second World War at Sea, which we've kind of circled around a little bit. We do have that. We do have a game or two of that scheduled for Origins in the Armchair Dragoons area. So if you're coming to Origins and you want to try Second World War at Sea, there's a couple of events for you. I actually would like to try that. It has been described to me as flat top like, with, of course, the traditional Avalanche Press bucket of dice thing, but you know. All right. Combat Commander Pacific. Combat Commander Pacific does get a lot of love. Combat Commander in general gets a lot of love. I'm not going to badmouth, you know, Combat Commander more, I guess. I have made no particular secret of the fact that I'm not a really big Combat Commander fan. I have never claimed that it is a terrible game. I don't think it's a terrible game, but I don't like it. So, Tokyo Express. David Imperato, Richard Berg made a game about the Japanese balloon campaign against the West Coast. Did he? I'm not sure that's a super gameable situation. It's not like there were medium weight Pacific. Farshad Niazi asks for me. I mean, I would call Empire of the Sun medium weight, to be honest about it. Maybe I was going to say Holdfast Pacific, but of the Holdfast series, some of those games are pretty well regarded and some of them are not. And the Pacific one is one of the ones that isn't. So, and there's E4 Airmen. I'm not sure what game he's talking about, but that reminds me of the Fleet Commander Nimitz from. Yeah, we're going to put the lid back on here. From DVG, which is a game that had a lot of issues. So, which have been amply covered by other channels. So I'll let those channels that have more direct experience with it talk about it. William Bird mentions the update of Tokyo Express. That is in the works from Compass. I don't necessarily have the impression that is coming soon, but that is supposed to be coming. Columbia's block game, Victory. Oh, what's that called exactly? Is it called Victory Pacific? Something like that. So when I played Victory, it was in its very early stages, and it may even not have been released yet. It was it was sort of this like generic World War II game, and it is called Pacific Victory. Yes, thank you, Kenneth. And I played it at an Origins or Gen Con or someplace like that, and I liked the system, but the fact that it was generic really turned me off. But then the ones that are out now are not generic anymore. They represent, like, you know, the actual history in that system and are probably pretty decent. Avalanche has been doing a lot of contrafactual, contra-historical stuff for a very long time, actually. So I don't think that's, you know, news exactly. I gotta find some. All right, we're going to do something that we normally don't do, so I'm going to apologize to everybody. But we are going to be right back. Okay, we are back. We'll give it a couple more minutes here, about 6 minutes, and then we will do a drawing. So sorry about that. Devil Boats from Compass. Yeah, Solitaire game. Did not get a good reception, Devil Boats. Oh, Paratrooper, Create Airborne Assaults at Palambang game. Was that a World at War title? I want to say it was. All right, we'll be going over to that in a few minutes here. Stupid pop-ups. Why you got to do that to me? Blood Reef Tarwa, Old Lady Plays. Good catch on that, actually. I had forgotten to talk about that. That's probably one of the rare ASL historicals that I don't have that I kind of like to have. Totally unwilling to pay what it's worth. That's the problem. Picket Duty is something that we have mentioned. I should actually bust out Air Force / Dauntless at some point. It is on my to-do list. That's going to happen anytime. Fortunately, I've secured additional scotch because I'm just about to have killed the Tam Navulin here. Sword and Fire Manila coming up. I think official word now, you can take this with a grain of salt. I think official word was that was going to be out this year. That's the Manila ASL historical module with something like 5 maps. It's going to be very big. Something like 5 counter sheets. Doolittle Raid. Good catch on that, too. I'd forgotten about that. And I have that and have played a couple of the scenarios, and it's very good. Brian Gash mentions the Pacific War from Pearl Harbor to the Philippine Sea. That's an oddball thing that comes up if you search for Pacific War on BGG. That's really the only thing. That's really the only reason I even know about it. There is also a it might be Marty. It might be 6. I don't know. It's really big though. Okay, John C. mentions that the U.S. used parachute troops to capture Tagaytay Ridge. Probably mispronouncing that, so I apologize to John and all the other fine folks in the Philippines. Kawaguchi's Gamble, Edson's Ridge from MMP, which happens on Guadalcanal. Yes. Other Charles, first of all, welcome to the stream. I don't know that we did mention Asia and Gulf. If we did, I may have missed it. So let's make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, good. Very good. He's from New England, so you can infer for yourself which socks he might be potentially a fan of. Gavutu Tanambogo. Yeah, so I mean, all the ASL Pacific stuff, of which there's a decent amount. War in the Pacific, 1942 to 45 by White Dog Games. So this is one where I appreciate that it's a generic title, but I still just soon have them not have reused the title of the SPI game, War in the Pacific. And The Tide at Sunrise is another one that's actually on the list of things I wanted to mention because I have it. Or no, that's the one that I don't have. Shit. No, I'm thinking Fire in the Sky now. The Tide at Sunrise is I don't have. Academy Games did Conflict of Heroes Guadalcanal, which is the one Conflict of Heroes game that I have played. And lots of folks like that game system. I thought the game system was decent. I didn't like the fact that I found the map really hard to read. Third World War in the Pacific. That's interesting. So there are some. The obvious one that I can think of is the China War from S&T back in the neighborhood of S&T number 80-ish, something like that. So well into the SPI era on that. and that's Sino-Soviet conflict in the 80s. So I would consider that a Third World War in the Pacific type of thing. There is at least one modern war magazine game called The Eagle and the Sun or something like that, that hypothetical modern conflict between the PRC and Japan. And I actually have that. Haven't done anything with it yet, as is the case with, so much stuff. I don't want to whine too much. Ken X does mention that there is Pacific stuff and a variety of other stuff in the works as expansion material from the folks at Compass for Third World War. 1942 from GDW we have mentioned. We Must Tell the Emperor. I'm not sure we've mentioned that, actually. That is a fascinating. Thank you for whoever sent me that. Thank you. Don't want to mention names just in case you want to, remain private on that. But thank you. Sent me We Must Tell the Emperor with the expansion, and I haven't had a chance to play it, but it actually looks neat. It is a States of Siege game, which is surprisingly appropriate for the Pacific War. I mean, it's obviously super duper abstract, but it's pretty neat. And it's got a very good reputation, and it goes for kind of a bunch of change on the secondary market, too. Half-Ass Gaming mentions, I actually saw those earlier today, too, the Joe Youst smaller scenario maps for some of the Market Garden scenarios. They look great. I think they look great. David Imperato clarifies that the China War was China versus the USSR in the 70s, not the 80s. All right, we are going to now do a giveaway. So let's pull up Mr. Giveaway screen here. So the way this is going to work is you are going to enter 5K or exclamation point 5K. If you win, you have to email me at ardwulfslayer@gmail.com. No, all one word, no apostrophe, no anything. ardwulfslayer@gmail.com. If you email me somewhere else, I'm not going to get it because I'm not checking for it. First giveaway of the evening is the newish Barbarians at the Gates from Compass and game design by Chris Van Beurden and artwork by Shane Logan. It's a very nice looking, traditional-ish looking point-to-point card-driven game. It looks like it's kind of the card-driven model from, say, Empire of the Sun or For the People, which is, I think, a rock-solid card-driven games model. So if you are not in the U.S., you can still win. We will split shipping 50-50, so it will still be expensive, but it will probably not be ruinous for either of us. And just in case, our man in Amsterdam, Viteus, is in the chat, please contact me at ardwulfslayer@gmail.com so I can get your stuff out to you from last week. If you don't reach out to me at that email address, I will draw for it for somebody else next week. So, Barbarians at the Gates, I'll let this run for another minute or so, and I will put a cutoff in the chat. So everything looks good right now. And you do have to say exclamation point 5K. That is the key word to put in the chat. And that will enter you for the drawing. Let me pull up the screen. All right, so let's see if it keeps going. Keep putting, if you haven't put anything in there, it only counts you once. So that's the other great thing. This kind of takes care of a lot of the administrative nonsense that I might otherwise have to deal with. So exclamation point 5K. Jim L., you're a wise guy. Speaking of wise guy, the reason I subscribed to Paramount Plus a couple of weeks ago was actually not the Star Trek stuff, which by and large I've been not that thrilled with, but for The Offer, which is a mini series about the making of The Godfather. And it's pretty good. It's not like the greatest thing I've ever seen. It ain't the best thing on TV, but it's pretty good. So we may talk about that a little bit later. It's called The Offer. It's on Paramount Plus. The guy playing Bob Evans, who's the head of Paramount at that time, And the guy playing Francis Ford Coppola are fantastic. Al Ruddy, who's the kind of the main character, is a bit of a blank slate, but that's kind of where he falls in. And Al Ruddy's still alive and is the executive producer of the damn thing, so they can't make him look too stupid. All right, I'm gonna put the cutoff in here. So if you're gonna enter, get your exclamation point 5K in like right now, because you got about 30 more seconds before I hit the cutoff. Looks like we got 65 entries for Barbarians at the Gates, brand new from Compass Games. Get those entries in. We are at 66 entries. I have no idea how many people are watching. 134. That's pretty good. Have no idea whether that's the that's pretty much the max. We got 2 more giveaways tonight, by the way, so bear that in mind. So call your friends, tell them to show up as well. All right, we're cutting it off. I'm about to push the button. I am pushing the button. Let's see who wins. I would zoom in, but it's pretty big by itself. GT Pony Rider, Mr. GT or Ms. or Mr. GT Pony Rider, please email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. Mention that you won Barbarians at the Gates, and I will get it out to you at the earliest opportunity. So congratulations to GT Pony Rider. So, oops, we're not doing that. All right, we'll do the second. We'll do the second one in a little while. So, congrats to GT Pony Rider on Barbarians at the Gates. It looks pretty good, and so it's unpunched. But don't be shocked if some of the counters fell out of the sheets. Let me put it that way, as is kind of typical for recent Compass Games releases. So otherwise, I think we are to circle back to television for a minute. I think we have one more episode of Winning Time. It's been renewed for season 2. I think Fucko mentioned last week, the week before, that Jerry West is suing them. Jerry West has threatened to sue them, and certainly Jerry West's lawyers have sent some nasty letters to HBO about the show. I really love Jerry West as a character in that show. I don't know Jerry West from Adam. I know who he was, but I am like not invested at that at all. And he's one of my favorite characters on the show. So take that, Jerry. The show's been renewed for season 2. At this point, it's been so good. I've never felt like this before. I mean, I think we all know what's going to happen in the next episode if you've been watching it. And I will just be thrilled to have had this spectacular season of television, even if season 2 is a complete dud. I have no idea, right? Sensuikon, Japanese fleet submarines in World War II different from Silent Victory. Sensuikon is a solitaire game. Silent Victory is 2. Well, one's Japanese subs and one's US subs. I mean, that's different, right? So, I mean, the model requires that you kind of be very specific about who you are, the sort of player agent in the game, right? And so we have different games for these things. If you want to play, an Italian sub captain, well, you got to get beyond the med or beneath the med. So, which I haven't had a chance to play yet, but that's actually pretty good. Nordic Maelstrom, season 2 of The Last Kingdom. I've watched like one episode of that. I need to watch the rest of that. I probably should watch it before Netflix collapses in a fireball because they're really shitting the bed right now. Drew Detterer, has someone done a strategic Pacific with split Japanese command between Army and Navy? I'm not aware of a game that formally does that, but I know that there's been talk of doing that in Pacific War about splitting the Japanese team between an Army player and a Navy player. And I think there might be some info on suggestions on how to do that on BGG, actually. Oh, sweet. Palelu99 has just finished watching all 63 episodes of my Hearts of Iron 3 Germany playthrough from several years ago. Thanks very much. Boy, that never really drew much attention. So you're like literally the only person that ever said, hey, I watched your Hearts of Iron 3 series. I enjoyed doing it tremendously. And actually, my like number one month for uploads was while I was playing that, because I would film 6 episodes a day and then upload 6 episodes. Then the next day I would film 4 or 6 more episodes and upload those. And so I had an enormous quantity of uploads that month. B25 Prince of the Skies. Yeah, that's a variant of B17. Mo from Mo's Game Table. Hi, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. Nordic Maelstrom asked, how hard would it be to use the Hunted and start with 1940 since the Type 7C is available there? Am I missing something? Because you can absolutely start the Hunted. I see what you're saying. Well, it's really the same game, though. You just change the tables over in 1942 or whenever the cutoff is. So you just start. I mean, the game's not different. But I see no reason why you couldn't just take the mat from if you wanted the extra challenge. I mean, the Hunted is harder, right? So you can just take the mat from the hunters and use it in the Hunted, and that might throw the balance off a little bit, but probably not in your favor, is my thought. Yeah, it's because Netflix is doing stupid stuff like putting ads in and canceling all the shows that people like. I am very interested in seeing Lock and Load's Glory into Empire game. Very much looking forward to seeing more about that. Now, Captain Asparagus asks about Lock and Load Digital, and I haven't tried that. I have played Lock and Load Tactical, though, and I actually like Lock and Load Tactical quite a bit. But my understanding of the Lock and Load Digital is that it basically gives you like a really small selection of stuff, and then you have to pay extra for a lot of stuff. But then again, they're not very expensive. I mean, they're a lot cheaper than buying a board game. So I don't know that I think that that's particularly sketchy. I mean, it's kind of the model for a lot of DLC-driven war games. Netflix is not associated with a major studio and beloved IP and is even losing original combat produced. So this is true. But they've got plenty of their own original content, a lot of which is really good. The problem is they seem indecisive, and so they'll like do really good stuff and then they'll cancel it. Peaky Blinders I haven't watched, so I don't know anything about that. HBO Max, I don't get ads in HBO. I mean, you get ads at the beginning. I can deal with an ad or two at the beginning. That's not something I'm going to lose any sleep over. But if there's like mid-roll ads, fuck that. I'm not paying $15 a month. Now, I think there's 2 different packages you can get with HBO Max. I think there's an ad package and a no ads package. The no ads package is obviously more expensive. I have paid for the no ads package. I'm not sure who we're talking about. Or is what's her name in that? Is that crap, the Queen's Gambit actress? Yes, that is the point. That is the exact point. I mean, think about for a second ASL. Okay, I'm going to use ASL as the example just because I can tell you a little more about the scenarios. If I buy, the minimum viable ASL product, I'm spending probably $150 to $200, right, on a rule book and Beyond Valor, somewhere in that neighborhood. Maybe I got a discount, maybe I didn't. And I get 10 scenarios in that pack, right? There's 10 scenarios in Beyond Valor. That's not true anymore. There's about 20 to 25 scenarios in there. Okay. So originally it was 10 scenarios, but it's more. The current version of Beyond Valor has a lot more in it. So then I have to turn around and say to myself, okay, how many of those scenarios am I going to play? All right. Now, maybe if you become a serious ASL head, you'll play them all. And I'm sure some people do that. But other people will only end up playing 2 or 3 of them. And sometimes they'll keep playing ASL, but they'll decide, hey, I'm super into this Pacific stuff with the Japanese. I really want to play that rather than playing, more East Front stuff. So when you think about that, it works out to be, I don't know, somewhere between $5 and $10 per scenario, right? Whereas the lock and load stuff, I think, is kind of allowing you to pay in like smaller, cheaper chunks for a considerably lower price per scenario. So, or probably about the same price per scenario. So I don't really have a problem with the way they're selling it. I know that there are some board war gamers who are probably not comfortable with that model. I am reasonably, well entrenched in the video game market that doesn't bother me particularly. GDW's Pearl Harbor. Yep, we mentioned this guy already. I've never played this. This is actually looks like a really interesting game. And I think maybe it's something that Compass Games will bring back at some point. The Hunters, German U-boats at war does cover the early war for U-boats. Yes, that is exactly right. The later part of the war is covered by the Hunted. You can't always skip them. Most of them will let you skip them, but not all of them. Ugh. Yeah, AT&T as a provider sucks bad. So no thanks. I had my run-in with them. We're not doing that again. I've gone on lucky missions too in the Hunters. It's harder to do in the Hunted. Because the naval modeling had all happened by that point. The U-boats had a much more of a free hand early on. Kenneth T mentions Old School Tactical Pacific. I have not even seen that. However, lots of folks who have played that game system really do like it. What makes submarine games interesting? In the case of the games we've been talking about, the Hunters and the Hunted and stuff like that, I don't necessarily think the fact that it's a submarine game is what makes it interesting. Remember that they are all based on the basic model of B-17 Queen of the Skies, which is not a submarine. What makes those games interesting is that they draw out a lot of narrative over the course of the mission or the campaign or whatever you're playing. That's why there's a tendency to call those narrative-driven solitaire games. Now, submarine games in particular can be interesting if you're talking about all the hidden information and stuff like that. In a sense, it might be better to play those kinds of things as computer games, in which case, check out Command Modern Operations, I guess. All right, I think we're about done clipping, actually, once I get through these last couple. I'm not feeling the mojo on the clipping. It's believe it or not, running this through StreamYard is creating a lot of extra drag on the stream. Doesn't make any sense, but it is. This is true. But I suspect that when you start to take a really detailed look at and analyze the simulation model in ASL, you end up as a designer, this is a suspicion I have, with a lot of artifacts that don't really make any sense. ASL is kind of riddled with that. And when you're playing it at the table, it doesn't really make much difference because there's a narrative emerging and you're distracted by that. But when you start looking at the simulation model, I think there's probably a lot of problems with it. And that's why you end up with something that you might start out trying to do, an ASL, and you'll end up doing something different. I don't think a lot of people say ASL is highly realistic. It's really not. It's got a lot of abstraction in it. There were a lot of design decisions that were made in ASL that work for it as a game, but don't necessarily work for it as a simulation. A lot of its modeling is highly suspect, or at best. But it works really well as a game, and that's fundamentally more important. Oh, I didn't know there was an editor. That's cool too. Andrew Frank says that OST Pacific is excellent. We have indeed mentioned Ambush and Battle Hymn more than once. I at this point don't have cable. We've been streaming only for quite a while. And I am absolutely 100% comfy with that decision. Oh, and Netflix is raising the prices too. They're like making the service, let's make the service worse and raise the prices. This is what's called bad planning. So, Mo, we are going to get a pretty good sense of how many half-inch counters we can fit in a compartment on these Aegis trays here with Barbarossa Army Group Center, because there's a lot of Soviet rifle. Oh, there's a lot of Soviet rifle divisions here. And regiments. HQs there, I guess. Since we've got basically as much as we're going to get tonight done on this, which means we're definitely circling back. This is true. This is absolutely true. I completely agree with Jeff Beeler on this. We need a variant for that World War I submarine game from Compass that will allow you to pick up lost English explorers and find dinosaur-filled lands. That would be fantastic. And then it turns into Source of the Nile. There are a number of interesting looking submarine computer games too. None of which I have played. Oh, so let's address this elephant in the room. This is not. I guess we're done with Pacific War formally, although we're going to probably make some commentary about Pacific stuff. Captain Sonar is like a party game for wargamers. It is fabulous. Totally worth your time. Now you need like 6, I think it's 6 people. There's also a game called, I think, just Sonar, which is a variant that I think accommodates fewer people. I expect it to be incredibly, incredibly loud. John Madison played Aces of the Deep. I remember that, but that's not one of the ones that's available now. Let me pull that up, actually. Do I still have that in my wish list? There's Cold Waters, which is a submarine game. There was another one, too. Or did I buy it? Silent Hunter 5, Battle for the Atlantic. That's one that I picked up on a Steam sale for something like $4, and I still haven't so much as installed it. Yes, this is exactly right. ASL works fine as a game. I mean, I think its credentials are really kind of beyond question. I just don't think it's necessarily a great simulation. And you know, it's trying to be less of a simulation than it is a good game. The game we are clipping, we'll be back to the cards that show all this next week. The game we are clipping is Barbarossa Army Group Center 2nd Edition. We're probably about halfway through it. I'm getting this. These are pretty full, I gotta tell you. So, yeah, this is just dumb decision. Netflix has been the market leader in this space for quite a while. Maybe they got complacent and decided that they didn't need to do leading anymore, and they could just suck and charge people more, and everybody would be perfectly happy with that. Keith Powell's on Google Fiber. I wish we had that here. That would be great. Heart of Darkness looks pretty cool too. What do I got here? This is Oban Little Bay. Let's pour a little bit of that. Mo did a great job in his video on the Aegis counter trays. I did a good job, but Mo did a better job. So lots of folks got their hands on the Aegis counter trays, and I suspect they're selling pretty well from what people are telling me. So Doug mentions the Captain Sonar is 8 people, 4 to each sub. Yeah, he's right. It is 8 people. That's hard to get together, but at a convention, it's just like, oh my God, you will dominate the room if you play that at a convention. And this is not as awesome, okay? Will there ever be a better game than Silent Service on the C64? He might be right about that. Very good. Very good. Good luck, Brian. I managed to get Pacific War done in about 3 days. But on the other hand, those were 3 very intense days of clipping. So at the moment, we are paying for Amazon Prime, which, you know, we aren't necessarily paying for Amazon Prime for Amazon Video, although some of that stuff gets watched, and some of it's really good, actually. This is not my thing, but The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is amazing. It's fantastic television. And of course, The Expanse, which very much is my thing. So we did a good job there. The Man in the High Castle I still haven't finished, which is totally up my alley, but I find it very heavy to watch, and I got to be in the right mood for something quite that heavy. There's that. This is possible. Kilroy was here also sipping on Oban. It's very good. 80 GMT trays. He is the GMT tray hoarder. Thank you, Mo. I appreciate that. We did not overlap 100%, so I'm satisfied with the videos. Oh God, the Tandy Model 4. Gato Circle 1984. I've been on a Gato class sub, actually, the USS Cod in Cleveland. I don't think it's in Cleveland. It's getting renovated somewhere else right now. But I'm paying for. So we get Disney Plus and Hulu and ESPN Plus as part of a deal through Verizon. Okay, so we got those. I've literally never watched anything on Hulu. At the moment, I'm paying for Paramount Plus and HBO Max and Netflix. And that's a lot, but it's still less than I'd be paying a cable company. Yes, and I've watched part of the video, but not all of it yet. Outer Range. So is that like a sci-fi or horror thing or what? Thank you, Kilroy. The Grand Tour, I was never that big of a fan of that, actually. It's certainly entertaining to watch, but I'm not enough of a car guy to really be into it. That's my thing. The Disney Plus stuff, I've pretty much watched the Star Trek stuff and the Marvel stuff. Haven't watched all of Moon Knight yet. But otherwise, I think I haven't watched all of Book of Boba Fett either. I wasn't really that thrilled with Book of Boba Fett. And then until they like literally ran out of material and said, oh, we got to bring in the Mandalorian and have a Mandalorian season 2. The Handmaid's Tale is another one. It's like, it's really good, but it's fucking heavy, and I don't. It's just very hard for me to sit through that. Yes, this is true. Ultima 3, yeah, I forget which of the Ultima games I played. There was one of those games that I played very heavily. I don't think I missed a super chat. Oh, I did. Geez, Daniel Barney. Geez, I did miss a super chat. That's because it happened when I was on the can. Have I had the chance to play Deadly Northern Lights by Thin Red Line? If so, how difficult is it to learn? It's fairly difficult. Start with the small scenarios. Of the 3 volumes of the series, Deadly Northern Lights is the best one to start with. It is sort of it's sort of like an action point. I'm going to describe it this way, and I'm completely mangling the terminology. It's kind of an action point economy game where you activate a unit, and it's got a certain number of action points, and it costs a certain number of action points to move and a certain number of action points to fight, and you might be able to have multiple combats. It's the next war system. Thank you for pointing out that I missed this, by the way. I really do appreciate that. Otherwise, that would be super dickish if I had just missed it. So I do apologize for that. But I mean, it's not the most complicated monster game you're going to find, but you do. I would say that if you are a incredibly casual connoisseur of NATO versus Warsaw Pact stuff, that maybe the 1985 series is one that you don't buy. Instead, go for Third World War from Compass, or maybe NATO from Compass, which is also very good. The 1985 games, this series is a very, very hardcore series. It's not that difficult. I mean, you can certainly learn it. You know, playing the small scenarios and working your way up. That's not a big problem. But I mean, you got to have the interest, and it's a huge footprint. It's the smallest of the 3 footprints, I think. I guess I don't know if that's the case by square inches, but it's still pretty big. Favorite World War II Pacific War television series? Ooh, I mean, McHale's Navy. I loved McHale's Navy as a kid. Tales of the Golden Monkey. God, I haven't heard that so much as mentioned by anybody but me probably in 15 years. I mean, there's the Pacific, the companion to Band of Brothers. That's very good. I've read all the books that's based on, but I haven't watched all of the series. That's my cat. She's normally not in here, but she decided she wanted to be in here tonight. So, Gilligan's Island. There we go. Oh, Black Sheep Squadron. Yep. Good call on that. This is when she wants to get out, actually. Scarecrow and Mrs. King. I don't think that counts. I don't think Magnum PI counts either. So, Might and Magic. I played one of the like later Might and Magics. I mean, I do remember the day when you had to make your own map on these things. So, she does not want to be picked up. She does not like to be picked up. So this is part of the current Compass release of Third World War. You can play that whole Third World War experience in a weekend, as opposed to the which it has a big footprint. But the scenarios are like and when we say scenarios, I mean like Arctic Front, right, is now just a scenario as part of Third World War, and it's on a map or two. It's highly playable. You could play that in a sitting, long sitting, but you could play in a sitting, no problem. Ultima Online, yeah, that's an interesting. I never played Ultima Online at any point, either before or after its heyday, but it's still running. Hawaii Five-0 is definitely out too. Fantastic. Probably the greatest TV theme song of all time, though. Wizardry Gold. Was it yeah, it was Ultima that was the Richard Garriott thing. He's still a kook. Crusaders of the Dark Savannah. I remember that too. First-person shooter for Might and Magic. I don't remember anything about that. The Ventures. I don't. Was the actual version of it used in the show done by the Ventures? Because the Ventures had a hit with it. I know that. SWAT. I remember that. Bard's Tale. I remember Bard's Tale for the C64. That's where I played Bard's Tale. John Madison, there was a game at some point that did have some kind of like grand prize that if you found it, I forget what game that was, and I don't really care too much. I've been playing, so still here and there. I mean, a lot of what I do is kind of check in for the day and do my writs and stuff like that. But every 5 or 6 days, I'll actually hang around for a couple hours and actually play. And I picked up the anniversary edition of Skyrim because everybody needs to buy Skyrim 3 times. And I've been playing that, and I got Steam up here, so I'll tell you exactly what I've probably put 20 hours into it since picking it up. I bought the upgrade version, so it was only $20. So John Madison mentions he's still got copies, 3.5-inch floppies of Darklands. Very interesting game, actually. So funny you should mention that. As part of the May Day celebration, a thing was released called Manhunt. This is the very last Mega Traveler product. It was going to be a Digest Through Publications product. DGP suspended their Traveler production and returned the rights to the author. And it was there thenceforth, and then DGP went away, and it was pretty much lost to the mists of time. Several years ago, the author found copies of it on God knows what ancient word processing program. Let me let the cat out. And it's taken several years for disk images to be made and them to figure out what software the word processing was and all this stuff. And they've managed to extract it and turn it into a PDF product. So, and it's out now, and you can get it for $10 as a digital on DriveThruRPG. No, man. Anyway, should we continue to make noise until she either let her out or she pooped? So, and I'd rather her not do that. Mr. Roberts, yeah, good call on that. So that's neat that happened, and just in time for May Day. The physical printed book is not going to be available for a few weeks, but I got the PDF already, and it's pretty good. And it's got like a big appendix in the back that's like, hey, here's the story of how we unearthed this artifact. Nordic Maelstrom asks, do I have the Traveler's Aid Society book? So which ones are we talking about? So, I mean, back in the day, GDW did the Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society as a little digest-sized magazine, and I have the reprints of those. I don't have all the individual issues. I have a bunch, but I don't have all of them. But I do have the reprinted volumes that Far Future Enterprise did. Most of that material has recirculated into the Traveler ecosystem in various places, various other books between, the early 80s and now. Now, if you are talking about the current Mongoose Traveler, Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society, which they've done 2 Kickstarters for, one for issues 1 through 6, and the next one for issues 7 through 9. I have them all. They're very good. There's a lot of good material in there. It's a variety Traveler magazine, right? So you'll have an issue that has like an adventure and a bunch of patrons and some ships and a couple NPCs and a lot of miscellaneous stuff. If you want to buy them, you probably want to get in on the Kickstarters, to be honest, because it's so tomorrow's not going to shock anybody to tell you that tomorrow's Traveler Tuesday video is going to be the unboxing and flip through of all the Traveler Mercenary stuff. And I looked at the price. It was like $80 plus shipping for all that stuff, for a box set, 3 hardcovers and 3 adventures. So that they're, the deal you are getting by getting it on the Kickstarters for those is really amazing. So I do have a pretty high opinion of the current JTAS stuff from Mongoose. I kind of wish it was more like a periodical rather than an annual Kickstarter. That's I think a somewhat awkward format, but it's the way they're doing it, and I'd rather have the material than not have the material. Death in Space from Free League Publishing. I haven't really seen that. Yes, Cyborg Primes was the folks that did the hosting on the May Day celebration. So Cyborg Prime Games is their YouTube channel. They now have a bunch of the interviews and stuff up. So if you're traveler focused, then it's worth your time to keep an eye on what they're doing. John C says there was a game he played on a mainframe called Fisk. The name sounds familiar to me, but I can't really tell you anything in particular about it. I don't really have this problem. Then again, the way my reader works, I get like super zoomed in, so maybe that's why I don't mind. Is it the font, or is it the fact they're using a tinted background on the physical issues? So I have physical copies of the first 6 and digital copies of 7 through 12, which relatively recently came out. Free League is the same group that is doing the new Twilight 2000. Yes. I do have Behind the Claw. It is right here. So it is 300 and blah, blah, blah pages. It's a big book. Why do they not have friggin' page numbers? Do they not have page numbers? Seriously? Well, it's about a 300-page book. And it's 2 sectors. It's the Spinward Marches and the Deneb sector. I have a variety of quibbles about recent things that Mongoose has done. But generally speaking, I've been more pleased than displeased with Mongoose's recent material. This covers the Spinward Marches and the Deneb sector. So you get I've done a flip through of this, by the way, so check that out if you want to watch the video. These are the 2 sectors. That's the Spinward Marches, and that's Deneb. So you get and even just the Spinward Marches or just Deneb or whatever is more than enough space to occupy you for an entire campaign, right? So you get very carefully calibrated positions on the bookshelves here. So you get a large quantity of material. And I like the balance that Mongoose is striking in the recent books of some detail on each subsector, but not describing every single planet. I like to have the space to kind of develop my own material on those planets. Now, the Spinward Marches in particular is so well developed over the span of the last 45 years that there's material on a lot of those planets that the Behind the Claw doesn't do. But then you can go to Deneb or the Trojan Reach or the Beyond or the Vanguard Reaches or whatever and get, a look at sectors that you have a little more of a free hand in. And I appreciate that. So what Pirates of Drinax is right there is, and there's a variety of supplemental support materials for Pirates of Drinax 2. So back in the day of Mongoose running first edition Mongoose Traveler, we're going to do another giveaway in a minute here, by the way. I'll give you 2 more minutes for a giveaway. Mongoose Traveler first edition, they did a magazine called Signs and Portents, which was not a Mongoose Traveler first edition focus thing. It was for their entire product line, right? So it had a lot of stuff in it. But they did a variety of things that basically they then put on their website for free. One of those things was Pirates of Drinax, which was this sort of sandbox space pirates campaign, which then later got expanded into this giant deluxe slipcased version. And then, which then has a bunch of additional support for it. It's one of the best published campaigns ever produced, in my opinion. It does take a considerable amount of game master effort to make it work at its absolute best, but it is nevertheless amazing. and it's very traveler, it's very sandboxy, it's very player driven. The players decide what to do, but there are hooks. It's got a lot of natural hooks built in to give the players levers to pull in the Trojan reaches and see what happens. Yes, I haven't had the chance to watch this. Jamie Lee Curtis was in Operation Petticoat. I'm not sure I knew that. Old Lady Plays, thanks for stopping by. Temple of Apshai. Yeah, I played that on the... I never had Temple of Apshai. I played it on a friend's whatever he had. I don't even remember what it was. There's a lot of additional support material for the Great Rift as well. That's not on the shelf behind me because it's one of those weird half boxes that they were doing, and it doesn't fit right on the shelf. I remember this, actually. I didn't get in on this because I already had all the material, and I've got like several products out with them already. All right, so let us do a giveaway. What we're giving away now is one of these, the standard Oregon Laminations counter clipper. And we're doing this in preparation for hitting 6,000 subscribers. So just to make it a different label. So you're going to enter exclamation point 6K. If you are the drawn winner, you're going to send me an email at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. I will not accept your email if you send it somewhere else. There's a lot of different ways to get a hold of me, but I need to kind of make sure that people participating in stuff like this are just sending me the email. ardwulfslair@gmail.com. You're going to tell me what size you would like. I'll buy you a 3mm if you want, but not recommended for regular counters. 2mm or 2.5 is my recommendation. If you do exclusively 1/2 inch and you like small cuts, go for the 2. If you just want 1 and you want to clip larger counters as well, go for the 2.5. Those are my recommendations. Tell me which one you want. Send me your actual name and shipping address, and I will get this out to you as soon as possible. So we'll give that a minute or so to run before we give that away as well. How much of this do we have left? Quite a bit. Quite a bit. I think I got this for Christmas. So we've killed 1 bottle tonight, so that's pretty good. I'm trying to clear the space out so I can justify driving down to Kentucky and driving home with 5 bottles of scotch. So yeah, I mean, I got inspired to, look at Traveler material again by the recent event. Plus, so there will be a Traveler Tuesday video tomorrow, plus next Tuesday, plus the Tuesday after that. Those are already uploaded and scheduled. So if somebody wants to become a new patron, they're going to end up waiting a couple of weeks on that to get their name to show up. And I've been meaning to put the Call of Cthulhu stuff up here as well. That's most of the Call of Cthulhu that I have, to be honest. I've got some 5th edition stuff that's not here just because it doesn't fit. That might make it up if I move the Goss stuff somewhere else. And right now, there's really nowhere else for the Goss games to go, so that's unlikely. So, all right, get your exclamation point 6Ks in right now. We have 73 entries, which is more than we had last time, actually. So more folks want a shiny new counter clipper than they do an Enemy at the Gates. The one that was returned to me, by the way, is back out the door. That went to our man in Amsterdam, Kyle Reese. That was, I think, last week's. So once again, if you are selected as the winner, we will... you can email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. There are a ton of people for whom Traveler was an essentially solitaire experience, because what they would do with it is, instead of like playing it as a conventional role-playing game, they would sit there and design ships or design star systems or whatever. I'm working on kind of a homebrew kit-bashed new UWP generator that I think will produce results that I like a little better. without undermining the general idea of the UWP as a spark for ideas. I've done videos on that. So what I did was actually have labeled mine, since I have 3 of them, and there's nothing on here that says this is the 2.5. So I put 2.5 millimeters in Sharpie and then put clear nail polish on top of that. This is true. Call of Cthulhu is better with laudanum. Can't argue with that. I mean, it's a wonderful system just for that. And there will be a Traveler Tuesday video on this too. Let's do the drawing, and I'll show you the classic Traveler edition that I just picked up. So let's draw. Stephen Harper, I think, just made it in at the very last second. Oh, 6 Actual is the winner. Congratulations, Mr. Actual or Ms. Actual. Please send me an email at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. Tell me which size you want, and I will get that out to you. For the counter clippers, they'll be in the mail by tomorrow. So, all right. So let's pull that down and talk briefly about, let me grab something else, actually. So back in the day, there were a variety of different ways to pick up the classic Traveler rules, right? They originally published in 1977, and then there was a second edition-ish in 1981 of the little black books. There was a deluxe edition, which contained the little black books plus some other stuff. Then there was a starter edition, and then there was the Traveler book, which put all the rules in like one omnibus volume. And none of those, there's minor differences between all of those things, and but not big differences, right? There's just some very minor tweaks that are made to the rules from version to version of Classic Traveler. So relatively recently, I ordered a couple things from DriveThruRPG as print-on-demand stuff. This is the reprint of the Traveler book. This is a hardcover, and you can see, as is traditional for print-on-demand stuff from DriveThruRPG, the registration on the cover is a little dodgy. Fortunately, inside it's fine. It's very much a reproduction of pretty good quality. The paper's a little thin, and you can see just a little bit through it. But you know what? This will keep me from beating up any of the 4 copies of the Traveler book that I have already if I need to play with it, right? And then I also picked up, and there will be a Traveler Tuesday video on, not this Tuesday, but a couple of weeks from now. This is the Classic Traveler Facsimile Edition. This is the 3 little black books 1 through 3, plus a little bit of additional material that's about, like about Traveler, and a little section of errata at the end. This is a facsimile of the 1981 books. The errata is not incorporated into the text. It would be nice to have a corrected text. Okay, let me point out that the next giveaway is going to be another counter clipper. So the code for that is still going to be 6K, exclamation point 6K. So if you already put in for that drawing, you don't have to put in again. But if you want to put in for the next counter clipper drawing, which we'll draw in about 6 minutes, then go ahead and do that. So let me pull this up, actually, because I can't tell you off the top of my head. So Nordic Maelstrom asks about the reprint. So let me check. I feel like the prices from DriveThruRPG for the print-on-demand stuff are generally quite reasonable. The hardcover, and this is, I think it's a 128-page hardcover or so. No, it's about 160-page hardcover. Is $20. Okay, now, is it a perfect book? No. Is it a perfect reproduction? No. But man, it's for $20. That's pretty good. The Classic Traveler Facsimile Edition. was pretty cheap. So this is on sale right now for $6, which includes the PDF. So if you're going to buy this, I don't know when this sale runs. This might be a Mayday thing. So if you're going to buy this right now, this with the PDF version is $6. So, you know, I guess now's a good time. Didn't plan that out. I have done quite a bit of Traveler video. Other channels that have done a lot of Traveler video include Seth Skorkowski, who is a very good general RPG channel, who happens to have done a lot of stuff for Traveler and Call of Cthulhu. Page 121 is a newer channel. He's got less than 1,000 subscribers. All one word, Page 121. He's done a bunch of good Traveler content as well. Once again, there will be another drawing for another counter clipper in a couple of minutes. Exclamation point 6K in the chat if you want to put in for it. If you've already put exclamation point 6K in the chat, then you don't have to do it again. That's why I am leaving it that way. I would kind of like a reprint of the print-on-demand rule cyclopedia as well, I gotta say. Yes, I mean, Traveler, it's safe to say at this point that Traveler is my favorite tabletop role-playing game. And I've kind of made the decision that I'm going to, you know, because I have a finite lifetime, right? And I don't have the time to play everything. And that's not to say that I won't play anything but these games, but the stuff that I am going to buy and keep and consider running is pretty much, with a couple of outside exceptions to this, is pretty much Traveler for science fiction, Call of Cthulhu for horror, for fantasy, some kind of BRP fantasy, whether that's RuneQuest or Mithras, more likely. The only other thing that I can think of that I'd consider running at this point is Against the Dark Master. I do have some Rollmaster videos in the works, but you know, I got to actually get to that material. So, but I'm unlikely to try and run Rollmaster again at this point. So, whole bunch of people have put in for the giveaway. Let's back up here. Interesting. Something weird's going on. All right, if you are interested in the drawing, the second drawing for a counter clipper, put in exclamation point 6K into the chat, whether you've done it before or not. For some reason, it doesn't seem to be picking it up. I thought it would pick everybody up, and it doesn't seem to be doing that. So this is absolutely correct. It is more important to have good group chemistry than it is to have a perfect system. Now, some of the like the Shadow World material I think was really interesting. So remember when I said if you already put exclamation point 6K in the chat, you didn't have to again? I'm wrong. Keep doing it. Anybody that's won already tonight is not eligible. But if you're interested in counter clipper numero dos, put exclamation point 6K in the chat, and we'll pull this up again. I don't want to miss anybody. The Iron Wind was one of the very early Avalon and Iron Crown Rollmaster modules, and in my opinion, it was the best one, actually. Better than Cloud Lords of Tanara. Nordic Maelstrom is Traveler, Beck Me D&D, and AD&D First and Second Edition. I just don't have the love for the... I do have a lot of warm nostalgia, fuzzy feelings about First Edition AD&D, and really Second Edition is very close to the same game. The differences between them are aspects of trivia. Anything that I felt was missing from Second Edition when it was published that I think should be in there, I can just put it in manually. It's not, what am I going to do? Make Lorraine Williams mad? So, this is not a thing I'm considering, but if I were forced to run D&D at this point, like run a D&D, I would start from a base of Second Edition. It's just the easier way to go. I would probably not use non-weapon proficiencies, which were an optional rule. Almost everybody used them in my experience back in the day, but they were an optional rule. You didn't have to use them. A lot of the MERP modules were really good, but they weren't necessarily good advent. Of course, you know, a lot of it, Iron Crown did weird adventures where they would give you this sort of bunch of locations, and you were kind of, it was up to you to what you were going to do with it. Boot Hill, which is not a game I regard particularly highly. Top Secret certainly had its fans, though. Gamma World certainly could be fun. Top Secret, I think, is of those early TSR non-D&D games, I think Top Secret's probably the one that holds up the best today, I think. So Torg came back as a Savage Worlds product a few years ago. It's called Torg Ultimate or Torg Infinity or something like that. At some point I'll probably do a video about this, but I don't see the appeal in going all the way back to OD&D. There are some mechanical things about OD&D. I mean, it's different, right, from other later versions of D&D, but I don't think that it's better necessarily. I think generally speaking, I think the later versions of D&D, all of them, are better than OD&D. That said, Swords and Wizardry specifically is a very nice presentational package of the OD&D rules. And if OD&D is your thing, then absolutely, you know, Swords and Wizardry is a place that you could take a look at. Chaos and Crusades is pretty nice too, if you're gonna be into that thing. John C. from the sunny Philippines, thanks so much for stopping by. John, I don't have an email address. Let me run the drawing right now. I'm gonna have a hell of a time shipping it to you in the Philippines if you win. I gotta tell you. Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials. Now, Patrick was a winner, but that was a couple of weeks ago. Patrick, let me know what size you want, and I'll get it out to you. Patrick is very lucky. So, congrats to Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials. So somebody says check my email before the next drawing, and it's a little too late on that, but we're going to do the same thing anyway. I'm pulling the email up. I didn't have it ready to go, but we can't be that organized. So you're about ready to... Okay. Six Actual, thanks so much. Winner of the I don't have a confirmed winner of the Barbarians at the Gates hasn't reached back out to me yet, so please do reach out to me and get me the infos. Please say I won Enemy at the Gates rather than either of the other things. I appreciate everybody tuning in this evening. We were a little less organized than I had hoped, but we were certainly not as badly organized as I feared. Next week, we will be back. So I would like to thank everybody for watching. I would like to pull up this little thing here. So please consider becoming a patron if you'd like to help support the channel. Oh, sweet. What happened there? Weird. Anyway. Thanks everybody for stopping by. We are done with the giveaways for now until we hit 6,000 subscribers, which will, according to my prognosticator, happen sometime later in the year. So we will be looking forward to that when it occurs, and not until then. So in the meantime, we have the show with Dan tomorrow. That is at Dan's channel, No Enemies Here. So tune in for that. I have no idea what the topic's going to be. Maybe Dan will come up with something. Maybe I will come up with something. I don't know, but it will be decided in the 5 minutes before the show. We also have Traveler Tuesday video tomorrow that I believe I have scheduled for 10 a.m. We have Traveler Tuesday for the next couple of weeks as well. And we have an unboxing video of the expansion for Admiral's War, courtesy of Fucko. So that is coming out on Thursday. Tune in for those things. So once again, I would like to thank everybody for watching, and we will see you all next time.